Welcome to Inspirational True Stories. Here, we share touching stories about love, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. Each episode will take you through inspiring moments that reach the hearts of those who cherish life. Will the grandmother be able to win custody of her granddaughter amidst a challenging legal battle? Subscribe, like, and tell us what's the most important thing you would fight to protect. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Elena Miller's small, cozy house in Seattle was full of warmth, a humble sanctuary where she and her granddaughter, Emily, shared quiet evenings and countless bedtime stories. Elena, at 70, carried the weight of years, each wrinkle a memory, each gray hair a testament to her resilience. But her heart remained steadfast, pouring every ounce of love into Emily, a spirited 6-year-old with curious, bright eyes and a smile that seemed to light up every room she entered. Emily's parents had passed away in a tragic car accident, leaving Elena as her only family. Despite the quiet heartbreak that lingered in the shadows, Elena found comfort in raising Emily. The young girl brought a new sense of purpose into Elena's life, and she was determined to give her granddaughter a stable, loving home. It was on a gray, drizzly morning when everything changed. As Elena poured cereal for Emily at the kitchen table, there was a firm knock at the door. The sound echoed through the house, unsettling. Elena's heart quickened. Visitors were rare. When she opened the door, 2 women from social services stood there, their expressions solemn. "Mrs. Miller?" one of them inquired, glancing down at a clipboard. "Yes, that's me," Elena replied, clutching the doorframe for support. Her voice trembled, but she met their gaze with quiet strength. The other woman, her tone gentle but firm, explained the reason for their visit. "We've received a report citing concerns about your ability to care for Emily due to your age." Elena felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. She gripped the doorframe tighter, her voice steady but laced with defiance. "Emily is my world. I may be old, but I am capable of caring for her, of loving her." Emily, sensing the tension, appeared at her grandmother's side, her small hand slipping into Elena's wrinkled one. She looked up at the visitors, her innocent face puzzled. "Who are these people, Grandma?" Elena forced a smile, her eyes warm as she gazed down at her granddaughter. "These ladies are here to make sure you're okay, dear. They just want to talk." Emily looked up at them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "But I am okay. Grandma makes sure I'm okay." The women exchanged glances, and one knelt down to Emily's level. "Sweetheart, we know your grandma loves you very much. We just need to check on a few things." A quiet tension filled the room, a silent standoff of love against policy. For Elena, this moment was a nightmare come alive. She'd fought so hard to keep Emily safe and happy, to give her a life where she could grow, free from the tragedies that had stolen her parents. Despite Elena's protests and assurances, the visit ended with an unthinkable reality. The women from social services took Emily with them, leaving Elena standing alone at the door, her eyes filling with tears that she dared not let fall, until the car carrying her granddaughter disappeared from sight. Days turned into a hazy blur for Elena as she grappled with the gaping silence left in Emily's absence. Every corner of her modest home was a painful reminder of the little girl's laughter, her inquisitive questions, and the warmth she brought into Elena's world. But Elena was not one to crumble. Despite the ache in her heart, she resolved to fight. She would not let bureaucracy or any amount of paperwork take Emily away from her. The morning of the first court hearing arrived with an uneasy calm. Elena's lawyer, John Thompson, had prepared her as best as he could, explaining the procedures and the questions that might come. John was a seasoned attorney, a kind man with graying hair and a reassuring smile. He had been drawn to Elena's case, sensing the sincerity in her, and he promised her that they would do everything possible to bring Emily back. As they entered the courthouse, Elena's hands trembled slightly, and John gave her an encouraging nod. "Stay strong, Elena. Just remember why you're here for Emily." Elena nodded, her heart resolute. She would hold herself together for Emily, for the family she was fighting to keep. Inside the courtroom, the environment was sterile and intimidating. Rows of empty seats stretched out behind her, and the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, sat high on the bench, observing each party as they settled in. To the side, the representatives from social services were preparing their files, reviewing notes and exchanging murmurs. The judge opened the session, her tone impartial yet firm. "We are here to discuss the custody of Emily Miller, currently under temporary care by social services, pending evaluation of Miss Elena Miller's suitability as her legal guardian." The attorney from social services began, laying out their concerns. They cited Elena's age, stating that while her love for Emily was evident, her ability to care for a young child might be compromised as she aged. The attorney's words were calm, almost detached, as though speaking about Elena's life as a mere theoretical situation. Elena felt her chest tighten. To them, her bond with Emily was just a case file, a problem to be solved. But for her, it was her entire world. Then it was John's turn to speak. He rose confidently, his voice steady as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, while it's true that Mrs. Miller is older than the average guardian, that does not diminish her dedication, her capability, or her love for Emily. Mrs. Miller has proven herself to be a compassionate, responsible guardian who has always prioritized Emily's well-being." John proceeded to present evidence of Elena's commitment to Emily. He shared records of Emily's school performance, which had been exemplary since moving in with her grandmother, along with testimonies from friends and neighbors who had witnessed the love and stability Elena provided. As he spoke, he called forth Elena to testify. Elena rose slowly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but she found strength as she spoke, her words filled with the raw sincerity of a grandmother's love. "Your Honor," she began, looking directly at the judge, "Emily is not just my granddaughter. She is the piece of my heart that keeps me alive each day. I may be older, but I have always made sure she's cared for, safe, and loved. Every day I strive to give her a home filled with warmth, stability, and understanding. Losing her now would be like losing my own life." Her words hung in the air, filled with a fierce determination that silenced the courtroom for a brief, poignant moment. Then came a small voice from across the room. The door had opened, and there stood Emily holding the hand of a court-appointed social worker. The sight of her brightened Elena's heart, even in this cold, formal setting. The judge allowed Emily to speak, her little voice clear and firm as she addressed the courtroom. She glanced shyly at Elena before beginning, a spark of courage shining in her eyes. "I like living with Grandma," she said, her voice unwavering. "She takes care of me, reads me stories every night, and loves me. I don't want to live anywhere else." A murmur swept through the courtroom, and Elena felt a tear slip down her cheek as she watched her brave granddaughter speak. Emily's words, so simple yet so powerful, seemed to capture the truth that Elena had struggled to express. After Emily's testimony, the judge nodded solemnly, considering the heartfelt plea from this little girl. Turning to Elena, she softened just slightly. "Mrs. Miller, it is clear that you share a special bond with your granddaughter. But given the reports submitted by social services, we must address any concerns to ensure her safety." The judge then adjourned the session, setting another date for further investigation and more testimonies. Outside the courtroom, John placed a comforting hand on Elena's shoulder. "You did well today, Elena. We're building a strong case, just hold on a little longer." Elena nodded, the warmth of Emily's words still wrapping around her heart like a shield. She would hold on. She would fight, no matter how long it took. Emily was worth every struggle, every tear, and every moment of this painful journey. As days turned into weeks, Elena found herself embroiled in a legal battle that seemed to grow more complex with each passing moment. Just when she thought they were making progress, new accusations surfaced, threatening to unravel everything she had fought so hard to protect. The court had barely acknowledged Emily's heartfelt testimony when a new report arrived, a letter submitted anonymously, filled with allegations questioning Elena's mental stability. It suggested that her age and isolation could lead to neglectful behavior and even hinted at moments of confusion or forgetfulness that could endanger Emily. When Elena first heard the allegations, she was stunned, her mind reeling with disbelief. The accusation felt like a stab in the heart. She was aware of the occasional lapses that age brought, but never once had she let her own needs overshadow Emily's. In every action, every decision, she prioritized her granddaughter's happiness and safety. To think that someone would question her ability to care for Emily felt like an unjust, cruel twist of fate. John, her lawyer, met her at the kitchen table the next morning. He was calm and reassuring as he reviewed the new claims, but even he could not hide his frustration. "Elena," he said, leaning forward, his voice low but firm, "someone is clearly trying to sabotage your case. These claims are baseless, but we'll need to disprove them with concrete evidence." Elena sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the situation bear down on her. "Who would do this, John? Who would go so far as to take Emily away from me?" "I don't know, Elena," he replied, shaking his head. "But I do know that we're going to prove that you're a capable guardian, and I have a few ideas on how to gather the support we need." In the following days, John set out to gather testimonies from friends, neighbors, and those who had witnessed Elena's devotion firsthand. He knew the power of a community's voice, and he intended to use it to their advantage. One afternoon, John and Elena visited Margaret, a longtime friend and neighbor who had often looked out for them. Margaret welcomed them warmly, her small living room filled with framed photographs and the scent of fresh-baked cookies. "Elena is the most dedicated person I know," Margaret told John, her voice filled with conviction. "She doesn't just care for Emily, she creates a home filled with love, warmth, and stability. There isn't a single day that goes by where she doesn't think of that girl's happiness. And anyone who says otherwise is lying." Margaret's words brought a sense of validation to Elena's weary heart, a reminder that there were people who truly saw her efforts. They spent hours visiting friends, neighbors, and teachers who all attested to Elena's commitment and unwavering care for Emily. Each testimony added another layer of strength to their case, a mosaic of support that painted a picture of Elena as a devoted guardian who would never waver. In the meantime, John had begun looking deeper into the anonymous reports. He hired a private investigator, hoping to find some clue as to who might be behind them. As the investigator dug through records and followed paper trails, small hints began to emerge, leading them toward an unlikely source, a distant acquaintance of Elena's who had recently fallen out of contact. The investigator uncovered that this individual had been facing financial struggles, and suspicions arose that they might have been motivated by the potential for financial gain if Emily were removed from Elena's care. John shared the findings with Elena one evening, the quiet resolve in his voice both reassuring and unsettling. "Elena, we're starting to uncover a possible motive. It's a small lead, but it's something. If this person filed the reports, they may be trying to position themselves to gain custody or, at the very least, to receive some sort of compensation." Elena listened in shock, her mind struggling to process this revelation. The betrayal stung. She had always believed in the goodness of people, and to know that someone could use Emily's well-being as a means to an end left her feeling raw and exposed. But she quickly straightened, the resolve in her eyes returning. "They can try all they want, John," she said, her voice unwavering. "I won't let them take Emily. We'll fight this together, won't we?" John smiled, a glint of admiration in his gaze. "Absolutely, Elena. We're not going to let someone's greed tear apart a family. I'm with you every step of the way." As the next court hearing approached, they were prepared. John had gathered every testimony, every piece of evidence, and he was ready to counter every accusation. Elena took comfort in the support of her community, each neighbor and friend who had come forward with stories of her love for Emily. They were not just fighting for custody, they were fighting to protect a life built on love, sacrifice, and resilience. On the day of the hearing, Margaret and several neighbors came to court, sitting together in solidarity. Their presence was a silent but powerful message of support, one that filled Elena with a renewed sense of hope. Inside the courtroom, the social services attorney presented the anonymous accusations with calculated precision, hoping to sway the judge. But John was ready. He rose, calm and assured, presenting the testimonies of those who knew Elena best. Finally, he introduced Margaret, who stepped forward with quiet strength. "I have known Elena Miller for over 30 years, she began, her voice steady. "I've seen the way she has poured her heart and soul into caring for her granddaughter. No one could ever doubt her dedication, and I stand here to tell you that these accusations are unfounded." As Margaret finished her statement, Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, her hope rekindled. She knew that this was only a step in a long battle, but with her community's support, she was ready to face whatever came next. As the days stretched on, Elena's fight grew heavier. Though she had strong support and testimonies in her favor, every new piece of evidence from social services added another layer of tension. The pressure was beginning to wear on Elena, her nights restless and haunted by the thought of losing Emily. One afternoon, just when Elena felt her strength beginning to wane, she received a surprising call from social services. They were granting her a supervised visit with Emily. Relief flooded through her veins. It had been weeks since she'd seen her granddaughter, and this opportunity, however brief, was a gift. The visit was scheduled in a small, nondescript room at the social services office, with plain white walls and a single window casting in a slant of warm sunlight. When Elena entered, her heart swelled as she saw Emily sitting at the table, her little face lighting up the moment their eyes met. "Grandma," Emily cried, rushing into Elena's arms. Elena held her tightly, savoring the warmth and comfort that only Emily's presence could provide. For a long moment, they simply held each other, as though no one else was in the room. After they sat down, Elena tried to mask her worries with a warm smile. She reached for Emily's hands across the table, her fingers trembling slightly. "How have you been, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Emily hesitated, her small face clouded with a seriousness far beyond her years. She glanced over at the social worker seated nearby before leaning in and lowering her voice. "Grandma," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." Elena leaned closer, sensing the weight in Emily's tone. "What is it, honey?" Emily took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, her eyes shining with a blend of fear and resolve. "It's about that night. The night when Mom and Dad," her voice trailed off, but Elena squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. "That night, before the accident, I remember hearing Mom and Dad arguing," Emily began, her gaze focused on the table. "They thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I heard Dad say something about a threat, about meeting someone who wanted to talk to him." Elena's heart quickened, her mind racing. This was something she had never known, a revelation that changed everything. "Did you hear anything else, dear?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded slowly, her small hands clenching tightly. "I heard Dad say that he didn't trust this person, but he felt like he had no choice. Mom was really scared too. She kept saying that they should just let it go, but Dad said he needed to stand up for what was right." Elena felt a chill run through her as she listened. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was beginning to sound like something far darker, something that had threatened Emily's parents. Her mind churned with questions, but she knew she had to stay calm for Emily's sake. "Thank you for telling me, Emily," Elena said softly, her heart swelling with pride for her granddaughter's bravery. "This is very important, and I promise we'll get to the bottom of it." Emily looked up at her gaze solemn and unwavering. "I just want to be with you, Grandma. I don't want anyone else. I want to go home." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, and she reached across the table to hold Emily's hand more tightly. "I know, sweetheart. I want you home too. I'll do everything I can to make that happen. You're so brave, Emily. I'm so proud of you." The social worker, who had been listening quietly, cleared her throat, signaling that their time was almost up. Elena's heart sank, the precious minutes slipping away too quickly. She wanted nothing more than to take Emily home with her right then and there. As they said their goodbyes, Emily looked up at her grandmother, a fierce determination in her eyes. "You'll come back for me, won't you, Grandma?" Elena pulled her into a final tight hug, whispering, "I'll never stop fighting for you, Emily. You're my everything." On the drive home, Elena's mind was a whirlwind. Emily's revelation lingered, filling her with equal parts dread and resolve. She knew this information was critical, a piece of the puzzle that could shift everything. The questions of that night, the argument, the threat, the mysterious meeting were all shadows looming over the case. There was now an undeniable hint of foul play, something darker than anyone had suspected. And if there were people who had threatened Emily's father, it meant that the stakes were much higher than she had realized. When she met with John later that evening, she shared every word Emily had told her, watching as his expression shifted from concern to intense focus. "This changes things, Elena," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "If Emily's father felt threatened and something happened to him as a result, we're not just dealing with a custody case anymore. This could be a matter of uncovering a conspiracy." Elena's gaze hardened. "Then we need to investigate, John. We need to find out who is threatening my son and why. They've already taken my family, I won't let them take Emily too." John nodded, his resolve matching hers. "I'll reach out to our investigator and see if we can dig into your son's records, his recent meetings, and any connections that might point us in the right direction. We'll treat this as a criminal investigation." The air between them was thick with determination. Elena knew the journey ahead was fraught with danger, but Emily's words had reignited a fire in her. This was no longer just about proving her ability to care for her granddaughter. This was about uncovering the truth, about getting justice for her family, and protecting Emily from a threat that had already cast its shadow once before. With renewed strength, Elena prepared for the battles yet to come, vowing that no matter the cost, she would shield Emily from the darkness that had tried to tear their family apart. Elena's heart burned with determination as she and John delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding her son's death. Emily's revelation lingered in her mind, a haunting clue that hinted at something far darker than an accident. Her son, Emily's father, had been threatened, his last days shadowed by a sense of fear and duty. Elena couldn't rest until she knew why. John, ever diligent and methodical, had reached out to their private investigator, a man named Samuel Crane. Samuel was seasoned, with sharp instincts and a quiet confidence that reassured Elena. Within days, he was able to pull together some initial findings. Sitting across from her at John's office, he began sharing his discoveries. "We found a series of phone records," Samuel explained, laying a stack of printed call logs on the table. "In the days leading up to your son's accident, he received multiple calls from an unlisted number. After some digging, we traced it to a burner phone, making it nearly impossible to identify the owner. But here's the interesting part. We were able to confirm that one of those calls was made from the offices of a prominent businessman in Seattle, a Mr. Henry Walker. The name sent a chill down Elena's spine. Henry Walker was a well-known figure, a ruthless businessman who had built his empire with relentless ambition. Her son, a software developer, had once spoken about a project he was working on, a project tied to data security and fraud prevention. But he had been vague, dismissing her questions with a laugh and saying it was complicated. Now it seemed that his reluctance to share details had not been out of secrecy but out of fear. John looked over the call logs, his brow furrowed. If Mr. Walker was in contact with Elena's son before the accident, it could mean he was involved in something serious. But why the threats? Samuel nodded. That's what we're trying to piece together. I've reached out to a few people who used to work for Walker, hoping they can shed some light on this. In the meantime, I've also obtained access to your son's old emails and documents. There's a lot to go through, but so far we've found references to something he was working on, something he called Project Guardian. Elena's gaze sharpened. Project Guardian? That sounds protective. Almost like he was trying to shield something or someone. Exactly, Samuel replied. We suspect that it was a security program, maybe even something with potential to expose high-level fraud or corruption. It's possible that Walker was involved in activities that your son discovered, and instead of backing down, he chose to confront them. John glanced at Elena, a grave expression in his eyes. If that's true, then your son might have paid the price for standing up against something he couldn't fully control. Elena felt a pang of guilt and sadness. Her son's integrity and courage had always been his defining qualities, and it broke her heart to think they may have led him into such danger. She looked at Samuel, her voice firm. Then we need to prove it. I won't let his death be in vain. In the following weeks, Samuel's investigation unraveled a complex web of financial records, emails, and hidden files that pointed directly to Henry Walker. The evidence began to pile up, each new document like a piece of a puzzle that revealed Walker's involvement in fraudulent activities. Walker had used his influence to cover up illicit transactions, embezzling millions while hiding behind a facade of respectability. Elena's son had discovered the truth, and that truth had cost him his life. One afternoon, Samuel and John called Elena to meet them at the office. When she arrived, they shared a key discovery, a video file that Samuel had managed to recover from her son's encrypted hard drive. The video was shaky, the lighting dim, but it clearly showed her son in his office, his face weary but determined as he recorded himself speaking. If you're watching this, it means something's happened to me, her son's voice began, filled with quiet intensity. I can't ignore what I've uncovered, no matter the risk. Walker's organization is involved in something massive. They're using shell companies and fake accounts to move money undetected. I tried to warn them that I would take this to the authorities if they didn't stop. But they laughed, and then the threats began. Elena's hands trembled as she watched, her son's image blurred by tears she couldn't hold back. He had been so brave, standing up against powerful forces, but he had faced it alone. And now, she realized it was up to her to finish what he had started. With the video as undeniable evidence, John was ready to present it at the next court hearing. The stakes had shifted dramatically. This was no longer a simple custody case, but a revelation of corruption and violence, one that reached the highest levels of power. The courtroom was tense as John stood to speak. Your Honor, new evidence has come to light regarding the tragic death of Emily Miller's parents. This was no accident, but a targeted attack. Miss Miller's son had uncovered a conspiracy involving Mr. Henry Walker, a businessman who was threatened by the knowledge her son possessed. This evidence points to the possibility that the fatal accident was orchestrated to silence him. John played the video, and as the court watched her son's testimony, a hushed silence filled the room. The judge's expression shifted, her gaze softened, acknowledging the gravity of what had been revealed. Then Emily, who had been sitting quietly by Elena's side, looked up and whispered, "Grandma, Dad was so brave, wasn't he?" Elena squeezed her granddaughter's hand, her voice breaking as she replied, "Yes, sweetheart. He was one of the bravest people I've ever known." In the days that followed, the story spread through the legal system and the local media, catching the attention of the authorities. An investigation was launched into Walker's dealings, and as the truth began to unravel, Walker's influence could no longer shield him. Elena knew they had achieved something powerful, not only for her son's memory but for Emily's future. Though the road had been hard, she felt her son's spirit beside her, guiding her through each challenge. And as she held Emily close one quiet evening under the Seattle stars, she whispered a silent promise to her son. She would protect Emily with the same courage he had shown, no matter what lay ahead. The tension was palpable as the next court date arrived. This time, the courtroom was not only filled with officials from social services and supporters from Elena's neighborhood, but also with reporters drawn by the shocking allegations against Henry Walker. The courtroom buzzed with whispers and curious glances as people took their seats. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the rows of unfamiliar faces, knowing that this hearing was more than just a custody battle, it was a quest for justice. John leaned over, his voice calm but urgent. "Elena, today's the day we bring everything to light. Stay strong. Emily needs us to see this through." Elena nodded, glancing over at Emily, who was seated next to her, her small hand nestled in Elena's own. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with trust and determination, and Elena's resolve hardened. She would face whatever came with courage for her granddaughter and for her son's memory. When the judge entered and the room settled, the social services attorney began by reiterating their initial concerns, mentioning again the potential risk of Elena's age and ability to care for Emily. But as he spoke, it was clear that the case had shifted far beyond simple guardianship. When it was John's turn, he rose with quiet confidence, his voice steady as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, we acknowledge the concerns raised about Mrs. Miller's age. However, in light of new evidence, we believe that this case is not solely about custody, but about a much darker truth surrounding the death of Emily's parents. We intend to prove that this so-called accident was, in fact, a calculated act to silence a man who dared to stand up against corruption." The courtroom fell silent. John glanced toward the judge, who gave him a slight nod, urging him to proceed. John called Samuel Crane, the private investigator, to the stand. Samuel recounted his investigation, detailing the evidence of phone records, emails, and the burner phone calls that connected Henry Walker to Elena's son in the days leading up to the accident. He explained the complex web of shell companies and fraudulent financial activities Walker had constructed, all of which had been discovered by Elena's son and threatened Walker's empire. The judge listened intently, her face stern as Samuel concluded, "We believe Mr. Walker's organization used threats to intimidate Mr. Miller, and when he refused to back down, they silenced him permanently." Next, John presented the recording, the video Elena's son had made before his death. As the grainy footage played, the courtroom watched in tense silence as he described the threats he'd received, his resolve to expose the truth despite the dangers he faced. His voice, so filled with purpose and bravery, echoed through the room, touching each person present. For Elena, hearing his voice again was like a bittersweet gift, a painful reminder of his absence, yet a moment of pride in his strength and courage. When the video ended, there was a hushed silence, the weight of her son's words hanging in the air. The judge leaned forward, her expression softened, clearly affected by the testimony she had just witnessed. Then John called his final witness, Emily. The little girl looked small and fragile as she was guided to the witness stand, but her gaze was steady, her spirit unbroken. She held tightly to the stuffed bear Elena had given her as she sat in the chair, looking up at the judge with a quiet resolve that was striking for her age. John approached her with a gentle smile. "Emily, can you tell us about the night about the night they had their accident?" Emily took a shaky breath, glancing at Elena, who gave her an encouraging nod. "That night, I heard my dad on the phone," Emily began, her voice small but unwavering. "He was talking to someone, and he sounded worried. He said something about meeting someone, that he felt like he had no choice. I heard him say, 'If I don't stand up for what's right, who will?'" Her words filled the courtroom, each one a quiet testament to her father's bravery. John let her finish before gently asking, "Emily, do you hear anything else?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I heard someone say they needed to get rid of the evidence. I didn't know what it meant then, but I was scared. My mom was scared too. They just wanted us to be safe." A murmur swept through the courtroom, people exchanging glances as the implications of her words sank in. Elena felt a surge of pride for her granddaughter. Despite the trauma and loss she'd endured, Emily was here, testifying with a courage that seemed beyond her years. The social services attorney rose, trying to discredit the testimonies, arguing that the case was a matter for criminal court, not family court. But the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Enough," she said, her tone firm. "The evidence presented today speaks volumes, not only about the conspiracy surrounding the death of Emily's parents, but also about the unwavering love and dedication Miss Miller has shown in protecting her granddaughter. It is clear to this court that Mrs. Miller has provided a home filled with love, safety, and courage." The judge turned to Elena, her expression softening. "Mrs. Miller, you have shown undeniable strength and commitment to Emily's well-being. I hereby order that custody of Emily be returned to you immediately." A wave of relief washed over Elena as the words settled in. She glanced at Emily, who was already beaming, tears sparkling in her eyes as she rushed back to her grandmother's arms. Elena held her tightly, her heart swelling with gratitude and joy. As they left the courtroom together, Elena felt the weight of the past few months lift. She had not only won back her granddaughter, but she had also honored her son's memory by shedding light on the truth. The authorities, now armed with the evidence, would continue the investigation into Henry Walker, and Elena had faith that justice would be served. Outside, the crisp Seattle air filled Elena's lungs as she looked down at Emily, her face full of wonder and relief. She knelt down, brushing a stray curl from Emily's face. "I promised I would never give up on you, and I meant it," she said softly, her voice filled with love. Emily hugged her tightly. "I knew you would come for me, Grandma. You always do." Hand in hand, they walked toward a new beginning, ready to face the future together, bound by a love that had withstood every test and conquered every trial. With the judge's final ruling in their favor, Elena felt as if she could finally breathe again. The long, arduous battle that had consumed her days and haunted her nights was now behind her, and the weight of that struggle seemed to lift with every step she took out of the courthouse. Yet, even with the victory, a quiet sorrow lingered. She had fought so hard, but it had come at a heavy price, revealing painful truths about her son's death that she would carry forever. Emily held tightly to Elena's hand as they walked together, her face bright and full of joy, seemingly untouched by the darker shadows that had plagued their journey. To Emily, this victory meant the world. She had her grandmother back, the one person she trusted most, and nothing could take her away now. John joined them outside, a tired but contented smile on his face. "Elena, you did it. You never backed down, no matter what they threw at you." Elena turned to him, her voice thick with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, John. You gave us hope when it seemed like we had nothing left." John nodded, his expression softening. "You two are family now, and family never quits on each other." He looked down at Emily and winked. "And I have a feeling you're going to be just fine, young lady." Emily grinned and held up her stuffed bear. "Thank you, Mr. John. You're a good friend. Grandma says we should keep people close who believe in us, and I think that means you." Elena chuckled, brushing a tear from her cheek. Her heart swelled with pride and relief, a calm settling over her as she realized they had emerged from the darkness together, stronger than before. That evening, Elena and Emily returned home, their small house once again filled with laughter and the warm light of hope. But even as they began to settle back into their routine, Elena couldn't forget the mission that still lay before her. Though she had won custody, her son's story was far from over. Henry Walker's actions had to be answered for, and Elena was determined to see justice through. With John's help, Elena met with law enforcement officials who were now thoroughly investigating Walker's involvement. The weight of evidence gathered through Samuel's investigation, along with her son's video testimony, had sparked the interest of the authorities. It became clear that the accident that took Emily's parents had been a planned act orchestrated to protect Walker's criminal empire. Elena's son had been one of the few people brave enough to expose him, and for that he had paid the ultimate price. As weeks passed, Walker's influence began to crumble. News outlets picked up the story, and the public demand for justice grew louder. Witnesses who had once been silenced came forward, empowered by Elena's fight, sharing accounts of Walker's corruption. Slowly but surely the pieces fell into place, painting a damning picture of a man who had evaded the law for too long. The authorities announced that they had enough evidence to prosecute him, and the arrest was made. It felt like a final vindication for Elena's family, a moment of triumph over the darkness that had taken her son. Through it all, Emily remained Elena's constant source of strength and joy. Together, they found ways to move forward, honoring the memory of Emily's parents by filling each day with love, laughter, and new beginnings. Elena enrolled Emily in a local school, and she quickly made friends, her joyful spirit a beacon to others. One night, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars flicker in the Seattle sky, Emily looked up, her face full of wonder. "Grandma, you always said that when people go away, they watch over us like stars in the sky. Do you think Mom and Dad are up there?" Elena wrapped her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm sure they're up there watching us and feeling so proud of you. You're strong, just like they were." Emily smiled, leaning her head against Elena's shoulder. "I miss them, but I know they're happy now. And I'm happy because I have you." As they sat together, Elena realized that in all their battles, They had found something unbreakable, a bond of love and resilience that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Though she knew the pain of loss would always linger, it was balanced by a quiet, unwavering joy in the family they had rebuilt together. In the months that followed, Elena became a fixture in her community, known as the woman who had taken on a system much larger than herself and won. She was approached by other families who shared stories of their own struggles, and she offered them the same support that had been extended to her. She began volunteering with local organizations, advocating for grandparents raising grandchildren, and pushing for policy changes that would protect families like hers. Her fight had become something larger than just her and Emily. It was now a fight for everyone who had been told they weren't capable, that they weren't enough because of age or circumstance. With John's help, she started a foundation in her son's name, dedicated to supporting families facing similar battles and providing resources for children affected by loss and hardship. Elena found a renewed sense of purpose in her work, and Emily's laughter and resilience became the light that guided her forward. Together, they embraced their new chapter, a life filled with hope, support, and the legacy of the family they'd lost but would never forget. One day, as they planted flowers in the small garden by their house, Emily looked up at Elena with a thoughtful expression. "Grandma, I think Mom and Dad would be proud of us, don't you?" Elena paused, wiping her hands on her apron and looking down at her granddaughter, her heart swelling with love. "I know they would be, Emily. They'd be proud of how brave you are, of how much love you've brought into this world." Emily smiled, her eyes bright. "Then we'll keep being brave, won't we?" "Yes, sweetheart," Elena replied, her voice filled with warmth. "We'll keep being brave. Always." And with that, they continued tending to their garden, each new bloom a testament to the life they'd built, a life shaped by courage, love, and the unbreakable bond they shared. With Henry Walker's arrest and trial underway, a sense of closure began to take root in Elena's life. For months, she had fought against forces that had once seemed unstoppable, bringing truth and justice to her son's memory. The courtroom battle had taken its toll on her, but she remained resolute, a grandmother transformed into an unlikely hero for her family. Emily, too, had blossomed in the months since the trial. She had started to make peace with her parents' passing, a painful reality softened by her grandmother's unwavering support. Their days were no longer haunted by the specter of uncertainty, but filled with routines, small joys, and the shared hope for a brighter future. The final day of Walker's trial arrived, and as Elena and Emily sat side by side in the courthouse, they both felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Walker, once a powerful businessman who had evaded justice, now looked small and defeated. His arrogance had faded, replaced by a weary defiance. Evidence from Samuel's investigation, along with the powerful testimony from Elena and others who had come forward, painted a clear picture of a man willing to go to any length to silence threats to his empire. As the judge read the verdict guilty on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and wrongful death, a collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Tears streamed down Elena's face, and she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The justice she had fought so hard for was finally served. Her son's bravery in standing up against corruption had not been in vain, and his legacy would live on, untarnished by the evil that had sought to silence him. When they stepped out of the courthouse, reporters gathered around them, microphones and cameras thrust forward. But Elena had no words for them, only a sense of profound relief. John, ever the steadfast lawyer and friend, spoke on her behalf, sharing the story of a family's fight for justice, of a mother's determination to uncover the truth. He honored Elena's journey, capturing the strength she had shown and the love that had driven her every step of the way. After the trial, life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, though Elena and Emily knew they had changed forever. Elena's quiet home became a refuge again, filled with warmth, laughter, and the simple routines that gave them both comfort. Emily started at a new school, and Elena watched with pride as her granddaughter made friends, excelled in her studies, and embraced the joys of childhood once more. Yet, even as they moved forward, Elena felt a calling to honor her son's legacy in a meaningful way. She reached out to John and shared an idea that had been growing in her heart, a foundation in her son's name, dedicated to helping families who had experienced loss, hardship, or the challenges of raising children after tragedy. She envisioned a support system that would help others avoid the struggles she had faced, a place where families could find resources, guidance, and a community that understood their journey. With John's legal expertise and Samuel's connections, they worked together to bring the foundation to life. They called it the Guardian Project, a tribute to her son's unfinished work, and his commitment to justice. The foundation would provide scholarships for children affected by parental loss, legal assistance for families facing custody battles, and advocacy for grandparents and relatives who found themselves in unexpected roles as caregivers. As the foundation grew, Elena found herself speaking at community events, sharing her story and listening to others who had walked similar paths. Her voice became a source of strength and inspiration, a reminder that love and determination could overcome even the darkest challenges. Each event, each family she met, felt like a tribute to her son, a way to keep his memory alive by helping others find their own paths forward. Emily often accompanied her to these events, proudly sharing in the work that honored her parents. She would stand beside Elena, her small hand clasped in her grandmother's, listening intently to the stories of those who came to the Guardian Project for help. And, in her own way, Emily began to heal, seeing that her father's legacy was not just a memory but a living force that continued to touch lives. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Elena and Emily returned home. They sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above. Elena wrapped an arm around Emily, who leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder, her eyes reflecting the quiet peace they had finally found. "Grandma," Emily began softly, "do you think Mom and Dad would be proud of us?" Elena smiled, brushing a hand over Emily's hair. "I know they would be. Your dad was always brave, and he believed in doing the right thing, no matter how hard it was. You've inherited that strength, Emily, and because of you, we've been able to keep his legacy alive." Emily nodded, a small smile on her lips. "I miss them every day, but knowing that we're helping other people, it makes me feel closer to them." Elena felt a wave of emotion and held her granddaughter a little tighter. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As the stars sparkled above, they both felt a profound sense of connection, a connection that spanned beyond loss, beyond pain, into a realm of love and purpose. They had come through a storm together, and now, in the quiet of their lives, they found peace, hope, and a future built on resilience and the memory of those they loved. In time, the Guardian Project became a beacon of hope for families in need, a symbol of strength for those facing adversity. Elena's story became a testament to the power of a grandmother's love and a family's determination to fight for what was right. And though the road had been long and filled with trials, Elena and Emily had found their way forward, holding tight to each other and to the memory of those they had lost, knowing they were never truly alone. Their journey had reshaped their lives, but it had also created something beautiful, a legacy of courage, love, and justice that would continue for generations to come. In the end, the story we bring encourages everyone to hold on to the values of family and kindness, as they are the source of strength to overcome all hardships in life.